excelling in our work. We have quoted Proverbs 22:29 often this year. Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men. Excelling in our work. For us to excel in our work, our attitude to work must be right. Because if we have a wrong attitude to work, we cannot excel in it. There are people who see work as a curse. And so if you see work as a curse, you will not work wholeheartedly. If we see work as a blessing, we will have a more positive approach towards work. So what is it? Is work a curse or a blessing? Is hard work a curse or a blessing? And that is what I'm going to address in the next 40 or so minutes and bring some understanding on this subject of work. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 to 3 is my opening text. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 to 3 says, "Thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of them were finished. On the seventh day, God ended his work, which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work, which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work, which he had created and made." If you take note of the passage we read, the word work occurs 3 times, twice in verse 2 and once in verse 3. God ended his work, God rested from his work, and God rested from his work in verse 3. So the first statement I want to make is that God works. God works. We see that from Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This is God's own self-introduction. God could have introduced himself as sitting on a throne in heaven with angels worshiping him. He could have introduced himself in any form or shape. But he introduces himself right from the opening pages of the Bible as a worker. Yes, he's Lord, he's master, he's judge, he's ruler, but he's also a worker. God works. And if you take note of the word work, wherever they appear in the passage we read, it is always preceded by a pronoun. His. So in verse 2 it says God ended his work. God rested from his work. Verse 3, and he rested from all his work. Anytime work is mentioned, it is not just work in general, but God's personal work. So work is important, but work is always personal to us. My work is not your work, and your work is not my work. Everybody has his or her work. God rested from his work. God works. He personalizes work. So what is work? What is work? This is my definition. Work is an activity that requires spiritual, mental, and physical effort. It's an activity that requires spiritual, mental, physical effort. It includes planning and execution of a project. Work always requires energy. It requires effort. It requires an exertion of force. In other words, you cannot be passive and work at the same time. You remember Newton's law. We cannot be passive and work at the same time. When we are passive, things will remain as they are. For things to move and to change, there has to be energy. Energy is what is required for work to take place. And each one of us, if we want to work, must use energy. Some force must be expended. So let me give you 3 dimensions of work. First, work is creation. When we work, we are creating something. Creation is an activity that leads to a finished product. God made things. He created things. That was work. He created finished products, trees, animals, human beings, the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, the mountains, the rivers. These are finished products. God made them. It is an aspect of work. Anytime we work, we are making something. If you take note of verse 2 of Genesis chapter 2, it says, God ended all his work which he had done. Work done. He ended the work he had done, not work he dreamt about or work he hoped to do, but work which has been done. And then in verse 3 it says, he rested from all his work which God had created and made. 3 words there: done, created, made. So when we are working, something must be done, something must be made, something must be created. Work brings about creation. It brings about something. It manufactures, it produces, it makes something get done, something get made, something get created. That's the first dimension of work. Second dimension of work is craftsmanship. Craftsmanship is an activity that requires skill. Work is not just doing something, but what we do requires skill. In other words, there should be some expertise, something you are very good at in addition to what you are doing. Work is not just making things, it requires skill. Every work requires skill. Every work. We may not even think they require skill, but they require skill. There's some work that people do that seems like, oh, it's so easy, there's no effort. But when you find out, you realize there is some effort. For example, if you find a woman selling her wares in the streets of Accra, she's carrying on some form of a platter some food. It could be bread, it could be groundnuts, it could be something, oranges or dakwa or when you live in Nima, you acquire some taste. So, all right. So you see the woman carrying this and selling and said, oh, orange or whatever. When you're passing by, it will look like, what kind of work is that? It's lazy work, but there is a lot of skill. First, being able to balance something on your head without it falling requires skill. And not only balancing it on your head, but walk whilst it is on your head. And not only walk whilst it's on your head, but talk at the same time. Doing 3 things: walking, talking, carrying. And under extreme need, running and still keeping that thing on your head. That is called skill. All right? The woman is working, but that work doesn't just take place. There is skill. It's craftsmanship. And so for every work that people do, whether they play football or they are barbers or they are dressmakers or they're scientists or researchers or professors in the university, whatever work that they are doing requires skill. That is craftsmanship. Of course, skill is not always the same. There are low-level skills and high-level skills, but that's not what I'm dealing with. I'm just saying that every work must create something. Every work requires craftsmanship. And thirdly, every work is a commission or something we commit to, an activity that occupies our time and our attention. It's a creation, it's craftsmanship, it's a commission. If work was not a commission, you will not know when you have finished it. You will just be working, and not know when you have finished working. For you to work and know when to start and when to finish, it doesn't just have to be creating something, doesn't just have to have a skill, it has to have a commitment, a commission. There has to be something definite you are committing your time and your effort to. So when you read, for example, that the Bible says that God finished the work that he was doing, how did he know he had finished? How did he know? When he started, how did he know he had finished? In other words, he had a clear assignment. A clear assignment. He knew how to start the assignment, and he knew when to finish the assignment. And when he finished, he had finished the commission. Work must have a certain commitment, a commission. And it is only after he had finished the commission that he rested. God did not rest when he was working. He only rested after he had finished the commission. That's a very important lesson to us, because a lot of us start working and we rest. And we get tired. But God starts working from day one and continues working the evening in the morning, until he finished what he had committed to. The 6th day, and then the 7th day, he rested. But you know, it didn't say he stopped. He rested. He paused and continued. Because God has not stopped working. As a matter of fact, he's still at work in us. He's working out his purposes in our lives. So he's still working. So he created skillfully by commission, and afterwards he rested. Each one of us in our work must have these 3 components. There must be something we are doing, we must do it skillfully, and we must be definite about it so that we can know when to begin and when to end it. So, for example, I am here preaching. I am working. How many of you know you've just come to my office? Okay, you see me work. Somebody will say, well, Pastor, is preaching work? I thought it was just work talking. It's a lot of work. Why is it working? Well, first, for me to preach, this sermon didn't exist until I created it. This sermon didn't exist. The scriptures were there, the words were there, but nobody had put together a sermon like this ever before. I had to assemble material to create it. For me to do that, first, there was a spiritual effort, spiritual energy. How did I do that? I prayed about this message. I prayed about it. God, give me a word. God, speak to your people. Show me what to do. That's prayer, spiritual energy. Then, mental energy. I studied. How can you know all these things? You study. I've read lots of books in this past week. I've read tons of commentaries. I've studied language patterns. I've studied culture. I've studied so much in relation to my message. That is mental work. So spiritual prayer, mental study, and then physical. What part of this is physical? Sitting down itself is physical. How many of you know sitting down is hard work? Oh yeah, people think sitting down is no work. You know, that's why a lot of people can't sit to work. Some people start working, they sit down, after 3 minutes they get up, they say they're going to relieve tension. They can't discipline themselves to sit in one place and study for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Sitting down is hard work. Hard work. So I had to sit down. I had to type my message, develop it in Word and put it in PowerPoint. That's hard work. Then after I have done all of that, I have to come and stand here for 45 minutes and talk. That's why I drink water sometimes when I'm preaching. It's work. Drink water. It's a lot of work. So there's spiritual effort, there's mental effort, there's physical effort. Just standing here and talking. I have my commission. Then I finish at a certain point. Do you know the most relaxed period of my life? When I'm the most restful. Do you know when? It's Sunday after second service, after you guys. Because from Monday, I start preparing my message. And I work on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sunday, I come to fulfill the commission. So I preach first service. I'm half happy. Then I have to preach the second service. You guys. The crowd in the second service is very different from the crowd in the first service. So I have to always change my style of communication in the second service. It's part of my work. I look at your faces, I know when you understand, when you don't understand. You're looking at me like that. I know I'm not getting through, so I have to. It's my job. I'm walking up and down. I'm sweating big time. That's my work. Then when I finish all of this, I go back there and people want to see me after service and come to talk to me about problems and things, and then I have all the patience and listen. So somehow around 2:30, 3 o'clock, when I have finished preaching and I have spoken to all the people who came to see me, is the best time of the day for me. It is almost like God rested from all the work which he has done. Then tomorrow morning, it starts all over again. The same process. You don't rest forever. You rest for a moment and go back to work. So you find work requires you create something, you must do it skillfully, and you must treat it as a commission. Something that you can start and finish. So, if you are a dressmaker and you rest whilst you are working, you will disappoint people. Somebody said, Pastor, why did you talk about dressmakers? For obvious reasons. You tell people, there's somebody, I can guarantee you there's somebody sitting in church today who was disappointed by the seamstress. There's somebody today. The seamstress disappointed you. That what you wanted to wear for church today didn't come. Because somebody rested. Somebody rested. Somebody rested whilst working. Whatever you are, whether you are a pastor, you are a dressmaker, you are a carpenter, you are an architect, you are a project manager, you are a lawyer, you are a doctor, you don't rest until the commission has been fulfilled. You don't rest. Because work is a commission. When somebody depends on you for something to be finished, you must finish it before you rest. You can't, in the middle of your work, stop everything and go for a funeral for 3 days. When your commission has not been fulfilled, it is not responsible. When we work, we are creating something, it must be done skillfully, and we must do it as a commission. So the first point I have made is that God is a worker. But God is not the only worker. God created man to work. God created us to work. Did you know that? You thought you were created to be happy. No, you were created to work. Genesis chapter 2 verse 15. Then the Lord God took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. Work. In fact, if you look at the sequence of events, God gave the man, took the man, put him in the garden, gave him a work, and then he said, you can eat everything that is in the garden. And then he says, I'll give you a wife. So work before you eat, before you marry. That is God's sequence. Work, eat, marry. Now some of you marry, eat, and start looking for work. No, you work, you eat, you're able to take care of yourself, then you think of messing up somebody's life. All right, so God created man to work. Adam's work in the garden was twofold. To tend. To tend means to cultivate, to work. To cultivate what God had given to him in Eden. God planted the Garden of Eden. The trees in Eden were planted by God, but if there were going to be second trees, God was not going to plant them. Adam had to cultivate that. Adam had to take from what God had done and multiply them all over the world. God plants the first trees, but we plant the subsequent ones. That is tending, that is work. Requires planning, requires physical labor. And then to keep the earth, or to keep the Garden of Eden, means to preserve, to guard, to watch it, to maintain it. Weeds had to be managed. So, right in the Garden of Eden, we see work. Work was required in Eden before the fall of man. Work is not something that came with the fall. Work started in Eden. Work is not a result of a curse. It is part of the blessing we have from God. It is a blessing to work. It is a blessing to work. Do you see a man who excels in work? How are you going to excel in your work if you think your work is a punishment?